How to tie a full Windsor knot in 5 steps. Number 1. Lay the wide end over the narrow end, tying in reverse. He turned to the funeral director and said, "Can you do this for me? My dad always tied my ties." "There are 85 ways to tie a tie," screamed the cover of young Mao's book, seen through his grief-swollen eyes, while his mind reversed the day's events. There are so many knots, snarls, spirals, hitches, kinks, snags, tangles, warps, contortions, ties to be tied and untied, still back there behind. He could not bring himself to pick up the book. 2. Bring the wide end through the gap between the layover and your neck. Intimacy was standing there, smelling aftershave, looking into his father's chest, at his neck, his chin, bent nose, but never to his eyes. He pulled the narrow end of the tie around. It was their time together, his hands weaving a full Windsor knot, brushing against his neck. A fat, callous-thumbed Leonard Bernstein. "Full or half?" he asked, as if there were a choice while he conducted. "I'll just do a full Windsor for you. That'll do best," he'd answer himself, as usual. It takes the wide end to the right. 3. Take the wide end to the right and lay over, then forward, up, and down through the gap between the layover and your neck. You're 26 now. It's about time you learned this, wouldn't you say? Nimble lifting, like spider's threads, slippery sound of the silk's nap whipping past each other, sounds of secrets never shown in the movements, entire centuries of history tied in 85 possible ways. The wind blowing silk in all of life directions. We conspired. I always like that word. Its meaning, to breathe the same air. When we breathed, my heart brimmed. It kept rhythm with his rough hands, self-assured, the heart drum taking me to the far-off places of his untold travel. Movements his were like a shaman's hand sign or turn signal when the blinkers were on the blink. The bruja, rituals of things beyond my knowledge, a series of elbows-tucked kung fu moves by the Mandarin Sifu of Windsor knots. So smooth, like nothing else he said or did. 4. Make a bridge and then bring the wide up through the back and then down through the knot in the front. The patterns blended. Angles flew like random particles of stars, moving around some vague dream of them, colliding, creating a superparticle of our DNA, not a hint, an insinuation, an intimation, nor iota, lead or mention, notice or notion. No, not one clandestine emotional release came forth. Our grandfather weaved billions of yards of silk, as many as the stars in the entire universe, sitting at the looms in Paterson, New Jersey. The endless chugga-chugga, chugga-chugga, chugga-chugga sounds of the intertwining apparatus, deafening spools, falling silk cloth weaving. Perhaps his father wove the very silk of this tie, making too much noise for father and son to speak through. 5. Hold the narrow end and tighten the finished knot by pulling it gently up to the center on your collar. His beer breath hardly held forward prevarications, as were expected. No revelations, not even of the bar fight curved scar that he carried on his chin. Despite father's knowing, he had always sought the truth of its origin. He wanted to hear something from his dad, something about the crescent moon whiteness and the stubble-starred nap of his chin. With a smirk, he'd always provide another canard. And one tale had been a blow with a shovel toward the end of the Korean War. Then it became a fall, chin-stunned slip on the wet metal ladder of a tin-can destroyer, a ship's created crater. And again stunned with the shuffleboard weight, disfigurement, and the Lavian Rose bar brawl with his drunken brothers. It was just then, just past, just fleeting, just a memory floating like the silk thread of his life. All the flaws, hurts, marks, the pockmarks, tracks, and wounds and scabs. The funeral director's hands were small. His nails were polished. His haircut was so tight to his head nothing unruly could get in, all sterile and distant. Although when his hand brushed my cheek, passing the tie to the center on the collar, it was warm. He tied the knot efficiently, adept, proficient, but only a half Windsor.